Good afternoon and welcome to Classic Car Restoration Club Live Q&A. I'm Mark Simpson. I'm joined by Ross Keel and Terry Wright this afternoon. And, we're dying to answer some of your questions, and as I always say, this is, we can do some back and forth here too. If you've got a question, or if you hear, somebody, or if you see somebody else's question, feel free to, if you have some information that perhaps we don't, chime in. This is a back and forth. We'd love to say we know it all, but we're not quite there yet. When we were 18, we did all know it all, but now. Now it's we're a little more unsure about something. So we'll if we get stumped or if you got something to add, please join in. Then right down below here, right below if you're on the website, there's a chat box right below where you can type in your questions. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook or something, then there's places there, or our admin guy will bring your question into this forum as well. Also, the question's there, but right below that, there's a bigger box that says, free download. That's our classic car terminology guide. If you wanna click on that, download it. It's free. It's just sort of a terminology guide. Kind of gives you some of the jargon that's used. I know there's different jargon for different segments of the auto industry. We try to cover most of it in there, and if you see something that's glowingly missing, we can always add some new stuff to it at any time. And then way down in the very corner, if you're on the CCRC website, you'll see a little button that says chat. That's not to talk to us. That's to talk to our member services teams that can help you with any number of questions you have regarding your membership. But that's not us there. Ours is that main text button right below the chat roll we have going. Like I say, feel free to ask your questions anytime. Jump in and we will be right with it. The first question that we got in some questions earlier, so guys, a gentleman has I have a 1996 Mustang GT. I've acquired another 4.6 liter that's locked up. I want to learn how to rebuild an engine from scratch. Wow. Can anyone set me up in the right direction for some directions and requirements to begin this rebuild? Please, I'm a novice when it comes to internal mechanics of an engine, but I do have a Hinge manual for all the bolts and nuts and torque requirements. Yeah, that's helpful. Well, guys, I know you've all rebuilt engines. What kind of advice can you give this guy wanting to start his first engine rebuild?
Tear it all apart and scatter parts everywhere and don't mark anything. And then it'll never go back together again.
There you go.
I don't know. That's a very open-ended question, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, there's some things you're going to need very specialized equipment for, So, disassembling an engine isn't too darn hard. Keep track of where all the bolts go and where all the caps and all the different components, how they go.
As it's coming apart, take pictures. That helps.
That always helps. And then, things like, having, first timers, I don't usually recommend tear the heads apart. Sometimes you're better off just to take the whole head into a machine shop and say, rebuild the head. Just because there's enough specialized equipment and process, you're going to need spring, valve compressors and all that stuff to get the spring, get the valves out of the heads and
grinding seats, removing seats.
There's enough that the heads can be specialized enough that, sometimes, work on the bottom end first. And once you're good with that, then you can move on to the top end.
That's kind of another thing too, though. I mean, as far as, sizing up your bearings and everything, it's almost
Mhm.
something that a machine shop would be better off
Yeah,
fitting it.
I don't know.
Fitting it.
I think if you want to learn to do it yourself, I think you can do it. You do have to, learn how to, use things like plastic gauge and stuff like that to actually measure your bearing clearances and stuff. And so I would say, yeah, you can tackle it. There's still things that are easier to, like, when you get the block all bored down or all blown apart, it's still, it's a good idea to take it in the machine shop. Anyways, have them boil a thing out, make sure all the passengers are clean, and then have them check the block, and if it does need to be bored or any machine work that be done, because you're not going to buy a boring machine. Well, maybe you would if you have unlimited funds. You'll buy.
It's getting a little spendy.
But once you have the bare block in there, they can test. Look it all over, and if they need to bore it, then you're going to need new pistons. So there's no sense in cleaning the pistons until you get the bare block, all checked out. Then you'll know where you're at. The block and the crank. And once those are checked, then you can move forward from there. You get if you have to if it has to be bored, then you can get pistons, and then of course it's a bit of a process learning from scratch, learning how to properly set piston in gaps and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a big learning curve, but it's the kind of thing, if you want to learn how to rebuild something, I'm all for anybody that wants to learn how to rebuild something, and there's no better way to do it than to do it. You can watch people do it all your life, but to actually skin a few knuckles and, do it hands-on, it's a skill that once you learn it, that you'll never forget it. And, yeah, you might make some mistakes along the way. Yeah, but that's part of learning too.
Yeah.
All right. I'm planning to replace the brake lines on my 87 Fiero. Somebody here had a Fiero.
I had 3.
I was planning to use copper nickel lines. The original brake lines have coiled armor on it. Should I put the armor on the new lines, and would there be a problem putting steel around the copper nickel line? I don't think there's an issue with the copper nickel and the steel. As far as I'm thinking, you're imagining galvanic corrosion that can happen with two dissimilar metal. Copper's not as bad as like aluminum and steel kind of thing, where you get the real issues with it. They use copper bronze and those kind of alloys naturally in a lot of like engine blocks for with the pilot bearing in the back of the crankshaft. That's usually bronze, and there's so those the copper nickel isn't an issue. I know Ross here is a big fan of the copper nickel brake line. He made me buy some recently. Yeah, it. I kind of go both ways on the brake line materials. I kind of like the look of a nice, cleanly bent stainless steel lines going through a car. There are others that just want to make the job really simple, and they buy. No, it's just kidding. The copper nickel is a good line. It's not going to corrode on you for the most part. It will corrode like anything. Even stainless will corrode over time, but it takes a long time to really corrode. So and the great thing about copper nickel is it's easy to bend. We can get it in a big spool, and it's easy to bend, easy to flare, and if you got to form really, complex curves, you can virtually do them by hand without having to worry about kinking too much. And without needing, in a lot of cases, you don't even need any special benders because it's flexible enough. But it's rigid enough, it'll hold up in the frame rail. The
The best way to buy them all pre.
as far as the best way, we did do a whole truck where we just ordered all pre-bent lines for it. I think Terry, you did
I did.
some pre-bent lines too on your
Okay.
Firebird. It's kind of nice having all the pre-bent lines with all the copper, all the the armor that. And now I'm not remembering the exact name for that big spring coil stuff that goes around your line. Is there an issue with it? I don't think there'd be an issue with it. Is it available? Yeah, it's available in 25-foot rolls or whatever. You have to get the size that matches your brake line. You got to remember to put it up. Sometimes with the copper nickel, it would be easy enough. You could almost bend that stuff with the spring on it. I know with stainless lines, you pretty much have to get the lines all bent before you slide that stuff on because you have to bend so hard on that stuff. But yeah, it's there for a reason, and it's usually you see it where like you have like the brake line that runs across to your rear axle or something. It's usually on there because a little bit of vibration over time. And now imagine copper nickel is just a little softer than stainless or steel, so you would be prone more to wear. So it's probably not a bad idea to put that wear spring or that shielding coil on it to prevent any kind of wear. It depends how much you drive your car too, I guess, more than anything. But
Yeah, if you get it, did yours come with it?
Yeah, yep, mine were all on there.
When you had it, it was already on it.
Already on there. Yeah.
yeah, and I've had that the coil stuff itself. When I've asked if a couple of our local auto parts stores, that nobody ever has it in stock. And it's something that has to be bought separate from the brake line, unless you bought pre-bent line.
Right.
So the only way I've been able to get that is to buy it online. So, but you can find online people that have it. Okay, John writes, I'm building a 1966 Chevelle SS. Aren't all Chevelles SS's? Oh no, it just seems that way nowadays. I'd like to know your thoughts on either installing one of the new quick ratio power steering boxes versus a power rack and pinion. Thanks. John, thanks for the question. Yeah, we recently, I had a Mustang that was in the shop that we put a quick ratio box on. And not too long ago, he brought the same car back and we installed a rack and pinion on the same car. He is a big fan of the rack and pinion versus the old worm gear box altogether. There's no arguing. Rack and pinion is more positive feel. There's less slop. There's just the nature of the engineering of the beast. There's a reason sports cars all have rack and pinion. There's, yes, it's superior to, but it's probably going to be more expensive than just buying a quick ratio box. And it depends what you want from your car. Some guys want to keep it as you can drop in a quick ratio box and it's not going to look like, physically like you changed anything under your hood. So if you want to keep that kind of originality, that kind of look, there's a good reason for that. Or if you want to easily switch it back to, your old box at some point, for whatever reason, date codes or originality or if we have some aspect like that, the quick ratio box is a fine alternative. The power rack is, it's a superior feel. I have a 35 Chevy that has rack and pinion steering and it drives like a new car. I plant my hand right there and it never moves, and I don't have to correct for everything going down the road. It's like driving a new car. So but like I said, it's going to be more expensive to drop in a rack and pinion setup, but it depends what you need out of your car. What do you want out of your car?
I think I agree. I'd go rack and pinion. You don't have idle arms. you eliminate a lot of the joints that could cause play, you know, so.
Mhm. How about you, Terry? You ready to switch your Firebird over to rack and pinion?
I like the play. It makes me feel like I'm driving the car because I have to.
We do that.
Yeah, there we go. Now, yeah, and it is kind of intrinsic to the animal. The old cars, they had a little bit of play, and you need to be alert. You can't take your mind off of driving, otherwise you're in the ditch or you're changing lanes without knowing it.
Well, mine's not that bad. I can actually let go of the steering wheel.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, I actually can.
Wow.
Even in a turn, and it stays there. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. Well,
It's not that.
when they get really old, like 1957 DeSoto range, then they have that way overpowered power steering that
You don't feel nothing.
you don't feel anything because.
I think it's
All right, Doug writes, "Hi guys, is there a smart order on which systems to revive a classic car that's been sitting for 25 years? Meaning gas tank first, clutch, brake line, oil in the cylinders, manually turn all at once. Is there okay? So he's wondering, is there something that you should do first? I think the big thing is that you do a bunch of things before you ever try to start. So just assume everything you got to do before you try to start. You don't have to do them all at once, but before you want to stick your key in the ignition and turn it, you want to make sure
get the fuel out of there.
get all the fuel out. If there's old fuel in it. We just brought a car. Well, we just had a car that had only been sitting for 5 years. Yeah, and that was the first thing we did is like we put the battery in for no other reason to see how much gas was in it. And then it's like, oh geez, we got half a tank. So we didn't want to start it. We didn't want to, we don't want to run more bad gas through the system. We had no idea knowing how bad or how good the gas was, but after 5 years, we weren't ready to take the chance. So the first thing we did is just drained all the gas out of it and replace that with fresh, non-oxygenated fuel.
25 years, you definitely want to
25 years, you
crank
went
it manually, crank it with it on the crankshaft before you.
you want to make sure the thing will turn over.
It's free.
Make sure the engine's not
If
stuck.
it's locked up, you might as well just stop there.
Well, sometimes you can free them up. I know
Yeah.
guys that will spend.
No, I mean you have to tackle that because it doesn't do any good to do much else. If the motor's not gonna be usable.
Which is a good thing. You could,
At least one turn.
you could like pop all the spark plugs out so you got no compression, and then maybe fog a little oil down the cylinders and make sure you could just put a wrench on the end of the crankshaft and see if you can get it to turn around 360 degrees.
Pull the dipstick and see if there's just oil on it or if there's water on it.
That's a good
I
idea.
can tell you a little something too.
Yeah, and that's part of I have a series out there bringing a car out of long-term storage, and that was the DeSoto that we had sitting for nearly 35, 40 years or something like that, where it hadn't been driven, and probably 35, maybe close to that, and the first thing to do is just kind of assess everything, before we even replaced anything. It was like, what, right away some things are bad regardless. Like we know any gas in the tank is bad after that length of time. We know that the battery is dead at that point because no battery is going to live 25 years, even if you kept it on a maintainer or something, at least no battery that I'm aware of.
Not that long.
So there are some things that need to be replaced right away, and things, oil, is a good thing to change your oil because oil breaks down over time. Gas, of course, all oils. So that would be if you got a manual transmission, your transmission oil. If it's automatic, it's a good thing to replace the drain and replace the automatic transmission fluid. Rear differential, it's a good thing to drain and replace that because oil breaks down over time. Greases break down over time. Heck, we on that 57 DeSoto, when we took the windshield wiper motor apart, and there's a big gear in it that's supposed to be greased, and when we pulled it open, all the grease had turned into some sort of brown crumbly substance that didn't resemble anything like grease. But it's a clear example how, even sealed up inside of something, for 50 years, it breaks down over time. And it's, there's like a ton of things like that can break down in the car over time. So, but you want to get like the big things, any fluids anywhere, assume it needs to be replaced. Because no fluid is designed, no brake fluids, no oils, no antifreeze, nothing is designed to last 25 years, period. So assume that you got to replace all that and then clean fuel lines, run some fluid through the brake system, bleed the brakes out. You don't need to bleed the brakes to actually do the initial start, but you do need to
Make sure they don't leak.
make sure, yeah. And then once you get all the new fluids in there, look for leaks because things like seals and all and hoses and things like that. Again, more stuff that breaks down over time more than use. Rubber hoses tend to get crumbly and start leaking for no apparent reason. Seals will suddenly not seal. It didn't leak a drop before you stop driving it, but now all it does is leak. So those are the things that, you can kind of assume that you're going to have to look for leaks right away. You don't have to replace every seal in it right away, but just keep an eye out and know that it could be a problem.
Yep.
The now, before I forget, last time I forgot, Terry has a little demonstration for us regarding servicing a door hinge. And we've all had those door hinges where, over time they start drooping and you got to it becomes a two-handed door hand closing thing because you got to kind of lift it and you got to close it at the same time. And especially if you had big door cars, like a Chevelle or something like that with a long fire.
Two doors are usually pretty heavy,
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I wanted to show you was so on another one of my Pontiac forums, somebody was talking about how do you get these springs off these, and this is a Firebird second generation Firebird door, driver's door hinge, and even though it's normal in the body shop world to take them on and off back when you service these to re-bush these hinges, it was pretty normal. But when I kind of read about some guys really struggling with it, like how you get them off, and some not necessarily as hard to get them off because you take a big pry bar, you can pry them out and get them up, but get them back in. They actually make these little tools that are very easy to get these springs off. So I'm gonna take the spring off, and I'm gonna kind of show you what you would do to. I'm not gonna take this pin apart and show you, but I'll show you the slot that's in it. But how easy it is to take these springs out and put them back in. So it's just a little spring compressor tool. And I think before last month when I did a little research before I was going to do this, and I looked these tools up, and they were actually pretty cheap. I think you could still get them for $15 from AutoZone or something like that. They're cheap, so it's worth having. But so I'm just going to take this. I'm going to take this spring out quick, or not quick. Let's see. Whatever's the easiest for you here. So you open it up, and you want to get as much of these coils in as possible. So you shove them in there. Oh, come on, shove it in there. And because I like to pop out, I drop it a little bit. And you just compress them, take it out. And you can use, I just use a wrench, but you can use a
Impact.
impact if you want to, a socket, ratchet. But it doesn't really take a whole lot to get these things out. Now, if you're doing it in the car, it is a pain. You can do it, but it's a pain. So I didn't even have to try to pull it out. I compressed it enough where it came right out. And it's just a matter of hooking it on this ear here and then that little hump there. And I don't know how it just fell out of there, but it did. But so you have to get that spring out to service this pin that they're just a brass bushing in there that wears. And then once it gets worn,
And then this one looks like it's broken.
that one came all the way off.
Yeah.
The bottom one is worn all the way through, so it's starting to wear the metal of the hinge.
Yeah.
Not unusual that if you have to lift up your door to close it, chances are you're through that brass already, and you're already in the middle of the hinge. Now, you can get some oversized bushings and get them in. You can fit them
Drill
in.
them
You can drill a hole and put them in there. Mine were wore. I took and just welded up the hole and re-drilled it, so I didn't put oversized in. But the factory pins, they just stamp these pins to put ears on them to keep them from dropping out. The ones you get replaced, they come with a little clip that just pushes over, and it's just to keep it from falling out from opening and closing. I put a drop of weld on mine just to keep it from doing it. But what I wanted to show you, what was kind of cool that I learned from an old timer a long time ago when I started out, and I wouldn't doubt if you guys had seen this too, but I thought I'd show it. Is when you take your new bushings, before you put them in, and I have a few different sizes and varieties here. I just want to look at one that I haven't messed around with. They're just little brass bushings. But one thing he taught me was before you take and put these in was to pre-oil them, and not just put some oil on them, but pre-oil them where you're actually forcing oil throughout the whole bushing. And I'm going to show that to you right here. Not going to be able to see that camera most likely. And like I said, if you think it's cool enough, you can get in on it if you want to see it. But I just take hair tool oil, put it on my, let's see. Actually, go ahead and fill that up for me. I'm going to just put it right on my finger, holding the bottom, go up to the top. Don't go over. Okay? It's up to the top. Take your finger and just push it. And that oil will come right through the pores. You see it come through?
Yep. That's cool.
And that pre-oils that bushing forever. Well, you'll probably want to put some on that wears off the outside, but it's inside. And you just drop the rest of it. But that bushing is pre-oiled now, and you don't have to worry about lubing that for a long time. But that's just an old one of those old guy tips that I don't know. Not too many old guys around that would be doing that. But when you do it, look at it, you'll see the oil just go right through the pores of that bushing. It doesn't look like it's porous, does it?
Right.
It just comes right through.
Yep.
You want to try one? I don't want them all lubed up. I might want to show that again. But
That's interesting.
yeah, so
Very cool.
yeah, so the bushing's lubed as good as you're going to get lube in there ever in the future. When you want to lube it, you just obviously just squirt it outside. But again, I'm not going to take that bushing out or that pin out and redo it. Now that you know how to do it, you can do it all by yourself.
What?
Nice.
I'll just put this back on quick. I think quick. It's funny how it just falls out of there. I must have had it just right. But I'm going to put it back in. Again, you can do it in the car. I'd rather take the doors off, especially if you have to get in there and drill that hole. And the pins are positioned so that you can take them out. They always go towards the middle of the car. So the top one's going up in the bottom, the bottom one's going down from the top. So they're always made so you can do it in the car. This I used to do a lot of in these old cars that big heavy doors like that. That's very common. I used to work in a pioneer dealership, so I saw a lot of this stuff. And I did replace a lot of those pins and bushings, but so it's not hard. You can battle with that for a long time, getting that back in there, especially. And if it's painted, it does a much nicer job than trying to
And the tools available where?
I looked it up, and I think it was like an AutoZone. It was, I want to say
So, like
15
it-
bucks. Step
Okay.
Manufacturing is what it is. Part number 21900. It's just and it's an inexpensive tool, and this one I've had, I don't know, 40 years maybe. But
Very neat.
yeah, simple, and
Awesome.
that's for GM door hinge. They worked on others, but it's easy once you have their tool, right?
Yep.
But lubing your bushings, that's a little tip that definitely it takes no time to do. Air tool oil, if you have it, 3-in-1 oil. It's a medium to light oil.
Okay.
But that's it.
Cool.
That's all I got for that.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. That's cool.
Sure.
Yeah. I've oiled the bushings before. I've never squeezed the oil through them. So that's kind of neat.
That was, I was very young and doing the bushing, and the old timers said, "Hey, come here, do this." After they whacked me upside the head, don't you know? There's a lot of that back then.
No, it's interesting.
I find it hard to believe that like a old timer had like neoprene gloves to put on them.
Didn't. And I've never done that with a glove on before. I did it just for this purpose. I said I didn't.
You wanna get over it.
Normally you just stick it right in. Squeeze it right through. I don't know. Maybe you do for some of your skin. I don't know.
Very nice.
But that's that. That's what I wanted to share with you last week.
Awesome. Yeah. We'll never hear the end of it. We had so many questions last time. We put poor Terry on hold until this month.
Yeah.
All right. Mario's got a question. He's got a 1966 Corvette with a 327. He stored it in room temperature in a temperature controlled garage for the last 3 years. He stabilized he had stabilizer in it, was added before storage. He's planning to start it in the coming weeks. What should I do before starting? 3 years isn't a long time, but you could probably start it because it's been stored at room temperature, but things like oil still break down over time. It wouldn't be a bad idea to change the oil before you started it. Your antifreeze is probably going to be fine. But it's something maybe after you get it up and running that you want to replace that as well. If you talk to brake manufacturers, they'll tell you, your brake fluid needs to be changed every year. But I'll tell you, I don't know a lot of guys that change their brake fluid every year. The reason being that brake fluid is hygroscopic. It absorbs moisture out of the air. So that because even a brake cylinder will have some air exchange either in through the vents in the cap and stuff like that, where you can get buildup of moisture in the fluid. That's why the big thing is to change it every year, so you don't build up moisture in the brake fluid, and then as your brakes are applied, that heats up, creates steam if it gets hot enough in your brake system. And if you get steam in your brake system, then you lose your brakes, kind of thing, because steam doesn't compress very well.
And I'd probably do the same, like you said, pull the plugs out.
Yeah.
Make sure you get some oil pressure in that thing before you.
Yeah. You want to, it wouldn't be a bad idea. Yeah, you probably don't have to go through all the priming it or anything again, but you could pull, or you could even pull the coil wire off and let it crank over. You're probably going to have to crank it a few times anyways, but we've been fooled by that most recently too. On a car that, we're going to crank it a few times before it'll start anyway, so it'll build up oil pressure, and the darn thing, after not being driven for 5 years, fires right off, and it's like, what? So,
but at least that way you don't have compression either.
yeah. So if yeah, if you don't have, yeah, it wouldn't be a bad idea to, pull all the spark plugs and crank it over, get the oil running through all the oil galleys, and make sure all your bearings are getting oil to them before you actually go through compression where you're in engine startup where your rods and lifters and everything are start banging together. So it wouldn't be a bad idea to, crank it over a few times, get the oil, watch your oil gauge. It should be coming up on a 66. It'll be a mechanical gauge anyway. So you'll see the oil pressure come up, let it crank over a few times, not so long as to burn up your starter or anything. Maybe you want to crank it for a while and stop and then crank it for a little bit longer. But that would be the big things I'd worry about. 3 years, things can, I have a lawnmower that, the carburetor gets clogged just sitting for over the winter. So,
Fine gas, yeah.
yeah. So, don't assume everything is going to work perfectly, even with stabilizer, but using stabilizer before you start it, probably will help dramatically as far as, like gunk buildup in the carbs and stuff like that, but it's not a guarantee either.
I'd get in and turn the key.
Yeah,
My 20-year-old self would get in and fire it up.
yeah, that's because you're too impatient, right? Let's see. Jeff asked, he loves the Chevy T-shirt.
Oh, hey,
Oh, yeah. Huh.
and the Twinkies cap even.
And the
Even
Twinkies cap.
he likes.
I'm in Florida. Now, would you like to know? Now, I'm in Florida now and would like to know how to deal with surface rust. Use rust conversion, sand first or after? This sounds like a paint prep question.
Yeah.
Perfect for a paint prep guy.
Where's the surface?
Yeah, what surface is it?
I guess it depends on how bad it is. Some you can sand right off. You can, if it's
you
light,
deal with
you can
surface rust.
naval jelly it. There's different things you can put on it, neutralize it. If it's sheet metal, I'm probably just sanding it off.
Sand it off?
I'd probably just sand it. That's probably well, it depends how bad it is.
Yeah, if it's really pitted or something.
Yeah, you might want to get some. What's really cool, and I don't think I'd ever be able to afford it. It's that laser removal. That's vaporizes everything on it. Rust and everything. It's really cool.
I'm not. Yeah, I've seen the demonstrations. I looked at and then I saw the purchase price of the laser rust removal. And they start at $50,000 and go up.
Maybe they'll come down in our lifetime.
Yeah. Well, there was a time when TIG and Healy arc welding was a thing only for the big businesses, and now it's like more affordable. Maybe in our lifetime, laser rust removal and like the laser welders. The laser welders are just amazing. If you ever see some of those like little quick clips you see on Facebook and stuff where the guy like just welds like and then like perfect beads and stuff.
Laser?
Those are laser welders.
Wow.
Those two were like, for a good one, start at like $20,000. They are insanely impressive in what they can do. Everything from welding underwater to just the perfect beads and the rate of welding and everything else. You just go, that's impressive. But like anything, eventually the technology will come down that bring the price down. Surface rust, if you're talking about surface rust on the outside of your car, where you got painted surfaces, I guess you're basically gonna can you if it's you're not going to use a rust conversion material on the outside of a body. That stuff works good on car frames and stuff, chassis
Heavier
stuff
metal,
and your car trailer and stuff like that. Maybe, even, if you got the whole insides of your car out and you got a shell, the rust conversion stuff. If you clean up all the loose stuff, you can use the rust conversion. I have used it on the underside of a hood on a 78 Ford F100. And it was just the hood I got was out of a junkyard. And for some reason, there was like no paint. It was just solid rust on the inside of the hood. And I thought, well, it's just a work truck. So I just did it with the rust conversion stuff, thinking, well, we'll see how long this lasts. It lasted years and years and years. It just never went bad. I kept waiting for it to like suddenly, but you kind of hose that stuff on. It turned the rust from orange to black. And then I top coated it with paint, scuffed it with a Scotch-Brite and painted it, and never had any adhesion issues or anything else. Granted, it's not exposed to daylight on the underside of the hood, but it is exposed to temperatures and temperature variations and everything. And it was a black car, so it was getting hot, plenty hot, but never had any issues with that. And that kind of convinced me that some of that rust conversion stuff is good. But it depends where you have the rust and how you want to deal with it, I guess.
Yeah, it does work really good on inside panels. Anything that's inside, not exterior, like you said. But on exterior panels, surface rust, you can sand it off. But if it's pitted, it's hard to get that out. You almost have to get some sort of blasting, whether it's media or whatever. But or even a little phosphoric acid used to use that, and it's tough to get that out of the pits. It can cause more problems. So, the sheet metal, I haven't had any issue with that quarter panel there. If it was starting to rust over a little bit, I had no problem going after it with a DA. No, I don't know.
Patrick writes, he has a Mustang question. We have Mustang people in our studio audience tonight. My biggest question is where can I get affordable automotive machine work done on my vintage Boss 302 parts? So by machine work, I'm assuming you want engine work done on a Boss 302. He lives then he followed up, I live in Grants Pass, Oregon. Beautiful country. We have the machine work, the machine, I'm not, of course, we're not familiar with, we often get questions like, hey, where's the best place in my town to get this done? And it's hard for us to know. It would be awesome if we, knew every shop but even good shops can go bad and bad shops can turn it around, get good. And it's hard for us to give a singular recommendation. My best advice for people looking for quality people in their area is to start asking the people who've built cars in your area. And the great way to do that is go to a car show, go to a car event, go to a cruise, go to, go in nowadays. You can even go online, and then find out the clubs in your area and start talking to people. They're going to know firsthand what shops can do quality work for a reasonable price in your area and what shops to avoid. And because they're not, they're not like, have no agendas to pursue, have you go to the wrong person. But don't take just one person's advice. Ask multiple people, see who they recommend in your area for stuff like machine work or body work or any kind of custom stuff like that. I know, in this area, we've got like some places that just specialize in Boss Mustangs and, but they're usually backed up, months and months out. So, that would be the best advice I think I could give you.
Yeah, and you'll hear the good guys you'll hear their names multiple times. You'll hear it over and over again. The guys that are good, and the bad ones too. Stay away from so and so. Yeah, go to the clubs, go to car shows, and talk to people. That's where they get it done. You'll find out soon who the quality people are. And good isn't cheap, and cheap isn't good. So remember that you want affordable, you want quality. I'd say first, affordable second. I guess.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And there's trade-offs no matter what, so if somebody's real affordable, there's a reason for it, but,
And they can get you in right away. The quality guys can't get you in for a long time. That's just how it goes.
Yeah, how long
Yeah.
it take?
Yeah.
yeah. But thanks for the question. Yeah. And then, that applies to a lot of things, not just your Mustang, Patrick. Like it's a recurring question I get. It's like, who can I take my car to in LA that'll do a, beautiful upholstery? And it's like, there are so many upholsterers in the LA area, and it would behoove me to try to recommend one guy without intimate knowledge of the whole industry out there. And there's so many great upholsterers and body guys and machine shops and everything else. So it's like, it's hard to know. My best advice is always talk to people. That's the great part. If you go to a car show and ask somebody, hey, what have you done to your car? And then if they've said, oh yeah, we rebuilt the engine, it's like, yeah, well, who'd you have to do the work? Not only do you get to find out who does the work, but then you get to maybe make a friend along the way too. Rich writes, what do you guys recommend for classic car insurance? Wow, this will get me into big trouble in a big hurry.
Mm-hmm.
This is like asking what's the best oil, or what's the
I tell you.
what's the best oil? What's the anything like, which is the best make of car? The there's some things you should some things you should consider. Uh, you know, for me, I've had different cars. Sometimes the car insurance for the pure stock cars, 100% original, can be cheaper than the modified cars. There are some companies that won't insure your car if it's modified at all, and so be aware of that. But the big thing is to get an agreed value on if you sustain a total loss of your vehicle, if your car should get totally wrecked or whatever. Make sure that whoever you have with your insurance with, that you have an agreed value, that you and the insurance company beforehand agree to the value of the car, and not have them tell you, even because in some places you may insure it for $50,000. And then once you sustain a loss, some insurance companies will say, well, we don't have an agreed value. Yeah, you can insure it for 50,000, but we're only going to cover you for 25. And then it's like you're suddenly sitting with only half the money that you believe your car is worth. And that's where the trouble begins. So make sure, regardless of who you go, that you have an agreed value, and that if there's a total loss, that is the amount that the insurance company will pay out on.
Most of the bigger ones will
Most
get
of
it in writing.
Most of the bigger ones will do that. There's always, it's better to be safe and ask than to be sorry and find out the other way.
Yeah.
There's probably a chance that there's us probably have 4 different insurance carriers. Maybe not, but it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's ask people what they've used, especially if they've made a claim, and see how the claim process went. Now, I haven't had a claim on anything, so I don't know how it works. But who I use, they seem to be pretty good at taking care of claims. So I think that's kind of important, right?
Yeah.
So ask around on that too.
Yeah, and I always say, the test of any good company is not when everything's going right; it's when things go wrong. That how well are you going to be treated And, you can do some research in that regard and you'll find, there's some good solid insurance companies out there that, I'm not going to recommend one, um, cause we'll all scream that, we all have, we're friends and we all, yeah, like Terry says, we probably all have different insurance on our classic cars, and that doesn't make one better than the other. It just means, for whatever reasons we've selected, a different carrier. Uh, just make sure that you have, you know, yourself covered, and make sure that it's agreed on, and you shouldn't have any problem.
And some of the insurances do limit your miles, so
Oh yeah, some do.
I mean,
So know what your
kind
restrictions
of one of the
are.
reasons I switched, because some of them limit miles to like 3,000 miles or to
Mhm.
and from shows. And
Mhm.
Yep.
it's like I drive mine way more than
I
that.
know. You drive yours like a daily driver.
Well, not quite.
Look
Sun's
out.
got to be out.
So we're notifying the local police department that, be on the lookout. Let's see. Adam says, I've got that Chevy t-shirt too. Huh.
That's a good one.
I guess they're a dime a dozen.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
I'm trying not to say anything derogatory. Well, it's part of our audience.
I'm trying not to rip anybody off. Just him. Just trying to rip on him.
I have a few
Uh,
Chevy shirts.
Jeff says, run some gas with 40-1 oil in the carburetor. Oh, I'm guessing this goes
As far
back
as
to
bringing your car out.
bringing the
storage.
car out of storage, run a little extra oil in it. Yeah, it ain't gonna hurt
Cylinders.
ain't gonna hurt anything. Get a little oil in the top end.
Good idea.
Doug writes, your pick for flushing aluminum brake and clutch lines. Brake clean, denatured alcohol, pushed through with compressed air. Um, alcohol does a good job of breaking down deposits in those lines.
Yeah.
You want to, make sure you get them purged well. Brake clean will also work. Just take the time. Make sure you purge all the fluid out of the line if you're trying to flush them. It's especially good to clean them if you are bringing something like out of long-term storage. We had a couple of questions on that today. Because it's still something where, brake lines are one of those things that fail even when a car's been sitting, just because of the nature of the beast. Either it's from, condensation under the car, as the temperature cycle, or as brake fluid sits in the line for extended periods of time, the moisture tends to want to settle out of it, and you can get spots in the line where, especially low spots, because water and brake fluid are two different densities. The water will drop down and sit on the bottoms of your inside of steel lines and cause them to corrode over time. So suddenly you put your foot, a car that's been sitting and didn't, the brakes worked beautiful when you last drove it. You hop in, 5 years later and put your foot and it goes to the floor. It's not uncommon. Happened to us 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
We had a car that it just, was perfectly fine. Put foot out, applied the brakes, and next thing you know, the foot goes to the floor. So it's because of things like that, of moisture, both external and internal in the system. So be aware that, things like, even though the brakes were fine when you drove it last, they may not be fine now. And it's a good idea to clean them. And flushing with, good solvents is a good idea to clean those out. Even brake lines are not brake, but fuel lines, it's not a bad idea to run I usually run like carb cleaner through them because I can get it in a can and a spray nozzle, and I can spray it into the line and disconnect it on both ends and spray it up into a towel on the other end, so I can run something through a line on cars that haven't been driven in a long time. But it's still a good idea to check all that stuff, especially on fuel systems.
Probably wouldn't have to do that if you're running E85, would you?
No,
It's cleaning it all the time, isn't it?
you have to have an additive though, otherwise it breaks down. And you get goo. E85 goo.
Yeah. That's another thing we've run into lately with with the E85 car in the group. That it tends to build a weird substance that we renamed goo, and so it's the E85 goo, and it seems to come from the separation of the chemicals that kind of bond the gasoline to the alcohol and all that stuff, and it just sort of creates this weird sticky goo in the intake manifolds, and it's a bugger to get it hosed out of things like that. But
Yeah, they say that Lucas has that product out that prevents it from separating.
So you have to put that in every time you fill it?
3 ounces.
Oh, what's that?
dug her up back. I haven't checked. I'm just thinking gummy. I think this is in reference. Oh, E85 last cast this ran was leaded. Any rebuilding I need to do? If you have gummy stuff in the fuel lines, yeah, basically that is, your fuel is breaking down, and it's, alcohol is a good thing to break down gasoline, gummy gas. And even, and for you guys that, like, if you, another thing, if you have like a filler neck on the side of your car, and occasionally it spews a little out on your, it'll leave a residue, and then you get in the right light and you see this kind of residue. The way to get that off is just rubbing alcohol, and that'll cut right through the dry gas residue stuff. So alcohol is great. Pure rubbing alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, works great for dissolving gasoline residue, and good way to get things clean, especially on painted surfaces, and also in fuel lines and things like that. I tend to, like I say, in fuel line, regular gas fuel lines, I like to use the carb cleaner. It's a little more aggressive than the alcohol. You got to be a little more careful with it, because you don't want to get any of that stuff in your eyes or be breathing it for too long. That'll probably mess you up in time. Good, guys. We have time. We're getting real close to the top of the hour. We have one more question in here. Says, gentleman writes, he says, I know the elephant is the term he was referring to our terminology guide, term used for the post 64 Hemi, in other words, the 426 Hemis. But I always forget the nickname for the first gen Hemis. Can you refresh my memory? Well, the 396 would have been the first big, or the older big Hemi. That's the Chrysler Hemi. 396 was called, the 426 was the elephant, and the 396 was called the whale. Actually, it's just weird. The whale. And then all the other Hemis, the DeSoto and Dodge Hemis, were referred to as the baby Hemis.
They don't look like a baby Hemi.
No, they're still pretty darn big.
Yeah.
They're still big motors, and there's my little bit of trivia before we go. All right, guys. We want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. Again, right below here is a terminology guide. Maybe you want to, download that before we go. We want to thank everyone for coming. Hopefully you're getting your cars out. We realize in some parts of the country it's pretty blazing hot. So, hopefully, you can still get out in the mornings and the evenings and go for a nice cruise in your classics. And until next time, I guess we're done. Thanks, guys, for coming out. We'll see you next time.